All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight on your brain. And I'm going to wish I had some white lightning because we're going to be talking Wheel of Time, episode 5. Eventually, we might ramble out some other things first because it was so upsetting. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, we'll probably start with a little college football because I know we have developed a little bit of an audience watching our Wheel of Time stuff. So we're going to annoy them with some football talk first.
Yes.
Instead of letting them stop when we're done talking.
One of the many reasons we don't fit into any group, not just the politics, but we're giant nerds who are also jocks.
Yeah.
So we had no clique in high school.
Yeah, well, we did. It was each other.
Basically.
It was exactly what your parents want, the not getting laid group. So
it certainly helped.
That got better as we got older. Hopefully we have kids, so at least got 3 times better because 3 kids between the 2 of us.
Yay.
But yeah, let's talk some college football because for those that know us or those that don't, I guess we should say Heath and I both went to Oklahoma State a couple decades ago. That is a couple decades ago.
For a couple of decades.
So 98, 99, at least that's when I was there. I don't know. Did you do another year after that?
Yeah, I finished there. Yeah, eventually.
So we were at Oklahoma State, and we got into the college football, basketball, wrestling. We loved the wrestling crowd and just that hive mentality, and that was our tribe. This is a healthy tribe. Yep. So that's why we complain so much about sports when we do our political talk, because it is the healthy manifestation of tribalism. And as we've seen from the implicit bias talks, it actually supersedes other things that other people like to put forward as their tribal identity. But back to college football, the Oklahoma State lost their Big 12 championship game. And here's why I think it was a good thing. Because I got my buzz on watching this game from 11 o'clock to about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was frustrating because it was just enough to give you hope, but still snatched defeat from the jaws of victory at the end of the day. But this is why I think it was a good thing, because I got all my ranting and raving and complaining out of the way, and the way the rest of the day played out, with Cincinnati winning big, with Michigan winning big, and with Alabama winning big. Oof. I mean, winning really big.
I know.
It actually set up the exact scenario that would have had Oklahoma State looking in the playoff door from number 5, because Cincinnati's the Cinderella team that everybody wanted to see in there, and being undefeated, they would have put them in there as the Cinderella team. Then you have Alabama beating Georgia, so they just flop spots 1 and 3, and then Michigan winning big. I don't know. Did they go up to number 1?
No, I saw earlier.
Either way,
number 1 is Alabama facing number 4 Cincinnati in the Cotton Bowl.
So. Oh, yay! So we're going to put the Cinderella team against Alabama right off the bat. So the rest of the day played out perfectly to be an even bigger disappointment, with having won the Big 12 game and all these other things happening to push you out of the playoff picture. So we got to get our hemming and hawing out of the way by about 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And then we didn't have to go through that frustrating disappointment that was the year before they started the playoff, when they played LSU and Alabama in the championship game, with Oklahoma State sitting at number 3 because they had lost to Iowa State earlier in the year. And so they stacked the deck, said SEC is the best because SEC won. And it's like, yeah, but you played SEC against SEC in the championship game. Of course, SEC won. No other conference could win. And we knew that would happen if Alabama won. And
well, that's why I was rooting for Alabama to lose, because I was sure it would happen either way. And I felt it would be more egregious and blatant of an example of how biased these aristocrats who pick the playoff teams are, because I felt like most people knew, no matter the outcome of the SEC game, both of those teams were going to end up in the college playoff.
Now, it would have been too hard to justify a 2-loss Alabama over a 1-loss Oklahoma State if again, State had won. And a lot of people were talking about Baylor being able to scoot in, and it's like, no, it's not going to happen.
But
Not with the way everything
I
else.
don't think so because of what you brought up, which was that last year of the BCS, and the the talking point from all the talking heads was that Oklahoma State, look who they lost to, and they completely ignored who they beat.
Mm-hmm.
And they beat something like 2 or 3 more top 25 teams than Alabama did that year. Alabama or LSU did that year. I think Alabama, because Alabama's the one who lost in the SEC championship, and then they just had a rematch for the
Yeah,
BCS
but
championship.
the difference between this and that time was they were both 11-1 teams. Mm-hmm. Going into that, this would have been an 11-1 versus, or 12-1 versus an 11-2 team, and so that would have been a harder bias to overcome. And so it would have been, it would have been Oklahoma State sitting at number 3, Michigan at number 2, Georgia at number 1, with Cincinnati getting that 4th spot because everybody wants them to be in there.
I still think it would have been pretty easy for them to do, because they would have just said what they said last time of, well, look who they lost to. Oklahoma State lost to an unranked Iowa State, and Alabama lost
to an unranked Texas A&M.
Oh, I thought at Texas A&M was in the top 25. Are they not?
Maybe at the time they won that game, but not now.
And then they lost to the number 1 team of Georgia, who would have stayed number 1 if they had won. So it would have been easy. And the point being, this ridiculous college playoff has nothing to do with record and what you prove on the field. It's all about pedigree. That's how OU keeps getting in the playoff, even though they lose embarrassingly in the first game, because they're OU. It's why Notre Dame always has a shot at being in, even though they rarely play anybody. Sometimes, they play
either way, it's all a moot point, because everything worked out perfectly for it to be exactly the way it ended up.
For what
even
the
if state
committee wanted anyway.
Yeah. So
and it's extra infuriating to me, because I thought the BCS poll actually made sense, because you have all these different polls, and so they made it a conglomeration. They made it an equation to factor in all of these polls so that you come up with a more or less definitive top 25, factoring in all of these different polls. Where the BCS messed up is that it included the coaches poll.
Well, this is my thought. What they need to do is do a conference ranking based on out of conference games throughout the year, the strength of that. And then the Power 5, this is the rank order based on their out of conference games. Stop letting these teams play some, Middle Eastern, Atlanta, Georgia State, might be through New York secondary school, especially with the SEC doing that in the middle of their conference games.
Yeah.
And so have a strong pre-conference schedule, use that to rank the conferences. And then if you win one of those top 3, you're in. And then that 4th is an at-large. And you can even have a play-in game for that at-large, just like they do with the NCAA basketball tournament.
Well, let me finish my rant about the coaches poll, because this is where, and I think it ties to the current situation, because what made the coaches poll so egregious is it was so blatantly biased. That year that OSU got gypped for the national championship game, it was so close. It was like 0.0, like 6.3 or something like that, of a difference between 3 and 2. And that could have easily been made up if the people who had screwed OSU in the coaches poll had even pretended to be honest. But there were a number of coaches who voted OSU like 15 or worse, including the Stanford coach, who we ended up playing and beating in the Fiesta Bowl, because by screwing OSU, that helped their ranking. It made no sense that the coaches poll was involved because of that reason. And for that same reason, all of the people on this stupid committee are, first of all, by having a committee, it's a bunch of aristocrats. Okay. It's a small group rather than having a large democratic system, which is basically what the BCS was, and they all have their inherent conference biases. And one of the things that has annoyed me in the past 10 to 20 years about the SEC bias, the SEC has some incredibly good teams. The SEC has never really had a middle tier. You have a cluster of incredibly good, legitimately good teams at the top, but then everyone else is way down here.
Mm-hmm.
So the Big 12, the Big 10, used to be the Pac-12, but not so much anymore. They kind of stink. Yeah, they had a smaller top because it would just be like in the past, it was like OU and Texas. But then you have had a good chunk of a middle tier of OSU, Baylor, TCU, sometimes Texas Tech, sometime Missouri before they jumped to the SEC. So you had a quality middle tier that those top two teams always had to play. The SEC, yeah, it's like 4, 5, 6 when you look at the whole conference, not just the two divisions. It's like 4, 5, 6 really good teams, but then those really good teams never have to play anybody except each other because everyone else in the division kind of stinks.
Well, part of this could be solved with just a simple rule. You don't win your conference, you don't play in the playoff.
Well, let me tell you what Dad thought a long time ago. And this is one of the reasons I hate Texas, because they screwed this up. He said this like back during the BCS still, when people were talking about before they got rid of the BCS, and they were just talking about expanding the BCS to a playoff system using that ranking system. He thought it was real simple is, look, you just get these super conferences, because by that time, the Big 10 had already said it was going to expand. The SEC had already said it was going to expand. And then other conferences were looking to expand. And he said, look, you just get these big conferences and tell them, hey, get yourself 16 teams, have a 16 team conference. So you've got 4 or 5 super conferences of 16 teams, and the winners of those conferences are automatically in. And then to round out the rest of the playoff with however many teams you want the playoff to be, then you have some sort of ranking system or committee or whatever. That way these, SEC bigots can let extra SEC teams in by adding in some at-large teams. So you can get the SEC loser. You have a chance to get someone like a Boise State that can get in, even though they're not one of those big conferences. And then you can round it out with a 7 or 8 team playoff.
Well, and you can have, so who's kind of getting screwed here outside looking in to some degree because of the Cinderella story of Cincinnati is Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But they sat there hoping Cincinnati lost because they have no conference championship game. Yeah. You can have an at-large bowl game that is to be determined by all these teams that don't have a conference championship to play that last week. So it's a neutral whatever territory, and you can have that. So Notre Dame could have played I don't know who else was on there, but like a Boise State or something to at least get a big win going in to that last game to compete with someone like Cincinnati. But as it is, they're just sitting there hoping somebody loses.
Yeah, and this is a great example of some things we've talked about of how sports can shine a light on bigger issues. This is a great example of not being able to see the forest for the trees, and the old adage, whose ox is gored. Because as me and my dad have ranted about forever, if you expanded a playoff and then you would have, say, like the Alamo Bowl being one of those, first tier of playoff teams, how much more viewership and money would something like the Alamo Bowl or the Holiday Bowl or whatever get if they were having, number 16 playing number 1, right? Instead of Timbuktu State versus, the third place Big 12 champion, the Big 12 team. Okay, so you get some viewership from the fans of those schools. The reason they don't do that is because the guaranteed free money and the people who are corruptly gaming the system don't want to change. Yes, for sure, there would be a much bigger pie if you had more eyeballs on all of these bowls that were part of a playoff tier, but they don't want to risk the guarantee of what they have now. Have you ever watched any of these like bar or restaurant rescue or remodel type shows?
Yeah, I used to watch the bar ones a while ago.
And have you ever noticed how often these people, whichever show it is, they'll go into a failing business and say, you have got to change this, and this. And the manager or owner will get indignant and adamant. Well, we can't do that because it will offend our regular customers. What regular customers? You're hemorrhaging money. So what if you annoy the 6 people who come here regularly on Friday night? If you increase your Friday night covers by 20% or whatever, but they don't want to risk the guarantee of what they have, and they can't see the forest for the trees. And it's mind-boggling if you just take a step back and look at it, but it makes sense if you can understand where these people are coming from and the blinders they have on.
Well, I had them on myself running the gym because I used to make decisions based on my regulars, which were probably counterproductive to generating new business. I say I probably did. I know I did in hindsight, looking back, but in the moment, it was like, well, I can't do that because XYZ ABC person or people would mess with their stuff. So it's all across industries. So I understand what you're saying. It's just, I don't know, there just seems like there could be little changes that could help with it without busting any of that system. One of the good things about playing these little schools, when the big schools play the little schools, is this small school gets a ton of revenue from it. They get paid to get their kids beat up.
That's why they do it. Yeah.
But also for the kids' sake, that's their only exposure to NFL scouts and higher ups along the way. So someone from Chattanooga State, such as who went to Chattanooga, Terrell Owens, has no game film that the scouts see unless they played a bigger LSU or a bigger school like that. So that one kid standing out as a man amongst boys in the small school gets that chance. So there is that benefit, but there needs to be a kind of a checklist. Okay, you get that one at the beginning of the season. It really doesn't even count. You know, you're gonna win 50 something to nothing, 60 something to nothing if you don't even run up the score. But this school gets some money, these kids get some playing time. Now everything counts after that. You've got to play two teams from a power conference. Outside of your own.
Why do you even bother saying this team is, well, look at this team, they're 12-1. No, they're not. They're 11-1. You darn well know that game there at the beginning of the season didn't count. That was a joke game.
And you typically have 6 games within your conference ish, depending on how big your conference is.
Yeah.
And you have 11 games total. You have a Power 5 conference. So one team from each Power 5 conference, that's 4 outside of your conference, and then one from an at-large team like a Notre Dame or someone else like that, an independent. We can do this in the regular season to develop a better ranking system, but it's not done. It's not done at all. So
no, because they want to control their little fiefdoms.
But either way, we as Oklahoma State fans probably fell on the knife with the loss versus having a long, slow death of 1,000 cuts watching the college playoff picture. I mean, there would have been a chance that they would have put O-State in instead of Cincinnati, just because the justification would be Big 12 supersedes the story of this unranked.
What are they, ACC or Big East? ACC.
Yeah.
This ain't basketball ACC. Stop it.
Now UH is a good team. They had a quality win to end it, but at the same time, number 5 O-State beating number 9 Baylor would have been much more substantial than what was it, number
4 versus number 23, I think.
Yeah. So again, we were just saved the agony. The play calling was atrocious at the goal line. We had 3 possessions on goal to go and 1. on the 1 yard
Well,
line.
did Warren ever go in the game? I think
No.
that was I think
Undisclosed
that was
leg
the
injury, which means draft stock,
yeah.
which is the sad thing.
I think that was the big hurdle, is that I don't think Gundy or whoever was calling the plays trusted the other running backs to get it done.
Well, that's the problem, because they did. So first goal to go on the 1 yard line, it was fade, desperation throw, field goal. 2 fades to Martin on either side of the field, and then a desperation scramble throw, which third and whatever they knew to blitz. Then the second time was run up the gut, both times getting stuffed, and then a desperation throw where they knew to blitz, and then kick a field goal. And then the third time, it was run up the gut, and both times stuffed, because we just don't have that big hoggy offensive line, that we run a more spread offense. And whoever that 62 Ike was for Baylor, that guy's he's a stud.
Yeah.
And he kept clogging everything up. And then it's third and 3 on the goal line. The quarterback's going to scramble out. That again, they just cover that short field and blitz. And then it was 4th and whatever. I don't mind that 4th down call. It just came up short.
So often you see this where it's okay. Yeah, technically I don't mind that 4th down call. It's the 3 calls that came.
Yeah.
It's the 1, 2, 3 before it that kind of set that up. So you knew kind of what was coming and that it wasn't going to work.
Yeah. And so it was the first time fade was the first 2, set up the third desperation.
Yeah. And it's not like we have Blackman or Des Bryant at wide receiver anymore. So
no. Well, Martin's good, but I mean, still you can't, they just basically ran the same play to both sides of the field. And then when they lined up to run, it was obvious run. And then when they threw that third down play action in the last possession, they had 1 receiver en route, and it wasn't even their best receiver. It was a backup tight end, which we hardly ever throw to the tight end to begin with.
Well, so much of this game was inexplicable from the standpoint of how they had played through the whole season, because they had played a much more kind of, Baltimore or old fashioned Pittsburgh type of protect the ball, let your deep play field position, let your defense get you in some good spots. And they didn't protect the ball. They put Sanders in a lot of bad situations. And some of that's on him. He's got to make better decisions. And I don't know if he's planning on coming back for his senior year or not, but he's got to make better decisions. But you as a coaching staff need to know a man's got to know his limitations. What was that from? Was that one of the Dirty Harrys? I think that was one of the Dirty Harrys.
God, you got me on that one.
Yeah. Anyway,
either way, we're first and goal from the 1 3 times, and not a single RPO. When you have a talented quarterback with legs,
he's great when he's moving. He's great when he's moving, and
but okay, so yeah, that's all the bitching, moaning I want to get up there.
Speaking of frustrating disappointments, let's talk about Wheel of Time.
Well, I'm glad you didn't say the Texans. All right, but yes, Wheel of Time. The one comment about the Texans would be the announcers were right. They were kind of just laying it thick this whole time. This whole game, and they were like, you know what? They just keep getting worse.
I just had some stuff on in the background while I was doing other stuff today. So
they got 200 yards on the worst defense in the league when they played the Jets. They're just getting worse every game, and that's just where we are.
Well,
if it wasn't for Detroit, we'd have the number 1 pick.
I thought Wheel of Time was getting worse, and then they keep sucker punching me by looking good with certain elements, and then they just fall apart.
Yes. So let's start with the good.
Yeah.
You liked Loyal.
I did. Both me and waifu laughed and were enjoying that scene. That was genuine enjoyment. His first scene. I understand where you're coming from. So the look wasn't quite right, but that's mostly because he's not big enough. An Ogier is supposed to be like 8 feet tall, but that's expensive to do. So I can let that slide. Other than that, the look seemed good, and the actor was very good with his voice and his delivery.
See, which I thought he was too he rushed out his lines.
Yeah,
and he was too much like the Rastafarian university professor that everybody loves.
I didn't get that from him. I did get, though, that he was speaking more normally, but I don't know how much of that was just bad direction versus just it's going to be really hard to do the slow style of speaking that Ogier are written to have and not bore the audience if it's
we did it with the Ents. Medium.
We did do it with the Ents, and it worked. And that's one of the frustrating things about Wheel of Time is so many of the things they do wrong. There are plenty of examples of other media that have done it very well. So it can be done, but they're not. But I liked him. I thought his second scene was a lot better. And I don't know what you thought about that, where he's droning on in the background while Nynaeve and Rand are talking to each other when they meet, and he's droning
that was a little
on
better.
In the background. Because that really was a little more of the character, even if, and this is an example of, this isn't just us grumpy old men complaining that it's not like it is in the, that scene's not like it is in the book. That's not what we're complaining about. We're pointing out where it's different in the book as an example of how it can be done well. These scenes aren't the scenes from the book, but they do a decent job of giving you the essence of the scenes from the book. Okay, the scenes where you meet Loial, the scenes where the separated Two Rivers people find each other. These aren't the scenes. These aren't the way they're done in the book, but they do an okay job of giving you the essence of those scenes.
Well, I here's what I didn't like about the Loial entrance is it was just there when it should be this very special thing in Rand's journey, because his initial reaction was that he thought he was a Trolloc.
Yes.
And that was missed because he immediately said he was an ogre. And he's like, oh, this fantasy thing that I only thought was a myth in books, I just saw one and I'm immediately identifying it, when he had just been through this traumatic series where Trollocs were trying to kill him, and there were big massive things, and a big massive thing walked in the room.
Yes.
And he started to try to defend himself.
He thinks he's a Trolloc, and Loial gets his feelings hurt.
Yeah. So that was something I thought they missed there. This is one of the reasons I didn't like it.
Rand's reaction was the big problem for me with that scene. I thought Loial did a good job of, that actor did a good job of representing who this character is, but then the actor playing Rand was like a blank slate there. And there should have been, because that Rand forms a pretty quick friendship with Loial, partly out of desperation, because you see a little bit of it in the series with how Matt is acting, of he's so consumed by this whatever it is that's going on. Ooh, they do an okay job with that. He's so consumed by this whatever it is that's going on that Rand's all alone. Even though he's here with one of his best friends, he's basically all alone. And so that to me was one of the downsides of the scenes with Loial, is that they're so short, and they're played almost for comic relief. And you can get some comic relief there in the books. There's some comic relief there with that scene, but there's also some depth there as Rand and Loial connect.
Which is what I was afraid of with some of these characters, is like the more oddball characters were going to be used as comic relief, when there was enough comedy to go around between all the characters in the books, but you needed depth. So they just threw Loial in as this melodious, bigger than average dude that likes books. And I think it was, personally, I think it was a little lazy. The actor, like you said, the actor's good, but the scene itself is a little lazy. And you don't get any of the, I mean, he's very important to things coming later, but that was all set up with this.
That is one of the continuing frustrations with this series, is that yes, you're not going to be able to create the vast matrix of foreshadowing that are in the books. You just can't do that in a series unless you want each season to be 40 episodes long.
No, but you can have
Granted.
some semblance of character development.
Exactly. But you can put some depth in there. And that is, that was one of the reassuring things from our commenters, is that we're not crazy old coots, is that no, people who haven't read the books are getting the same feeling that we are, which is there's no there. There's no depth to these characters. There's nothing going on.
Which is the problem with making them adults from the beginning. You just skip the step of them growing up.
Yeah.
And they just wanted them to be this certain thing from the beginning. And it's kind of annoying because
as an example of the lack of foreshadowing, I'm curious if anyone wants to comment on this. Did you notice the heron marked blade? Because I was texting with a mutual friend of ours who we can no longer be friends with because he doesn't hate the show, but he has terrible taste in movies and TV. You know who I'm talking about.
Do I? Jeremy?
T.
Oh, T.
Yeah, he has. This is someone who thinks that the replacements and evolution are the height of film comedy.
Hey, The Replacements is a good freaking movie. That is one of the best football movies ever. That and Remember the Titans are the two best football movies
but it's also kind of a dumb movie. It's a lovably dumb movie. Yeah. But anyway, so I was texting with him and I told him we can't be friends anymore because he doesn't hate it, but he doesn't think it's great either. And this is someone who obviously he's not a big reader and he hasn't read the source material. So for him, it's something that's just on while he's doing other stuff, and it's entertaining enough. But one of the things he noticed, because he'd watched the first couple episodes when I talked to him, and I'd forgotten, they zoom in on the heron on the sword. And he said, "Oh, this must be something that's important." And then they never come back to it. And
which
they
is
still
where
have
Camelin would have been great for Gareth Bryan.
And so I'm curious if any
of the whole explanation of the heron that he does in the books.
I'm curious if any of if that jumped out to any of the other people who were watching, who have commented on our last rants, and if that jumped out at you, and if you noticed it and what you thought about it, because that does matter, that is important, and it should have been addressed and could have been addressed a very long time ago. And I don't mind. So I was annoyed at the very opening of this episode for a couple of reasons, and the big one being, wait, they just jumped straight to the White Tower, which since we know there are people who haven't read the book, so I'm going to try and beat around the bush as much as I can. But that's not how it happens in the books. They skip a big chunk and they move stuff that happens at this other place, and they move it to the White Tower for some reason. We'll see why, in the next episode of how they're going to do this.
But just skipping, I mean, and then the whole lazy, and 3 months later on the little bottom of the screen, instead of
they did? I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, that was with the caravan where Moiraine is going toward the White Tower. They showed him going up to the White Tower, and it said
there was kind of a throwaway line there at the beginning where Matt says that it's been a month without a bed, so that they'd been traveling a month, and so rather than in the books where they're sleeping in fields and in hay piles and everything on the road, they just skip all that, which is fine. I understand you've got to cut a bunch of stuff for a film. But if you can't just say that, if you're not going to do something to let us feel that, you have this throwaway line that they've been traveling for a month, but we don't feel it. As far as it feels like it's been a couple of days.
So I've got some thoughts on some of this. First of all, let's give some credit with the acting on some places. Leandrin is freaking great. She makes you feel exactly what you should feel from that character.
Yes.
She does a great job. I love Steppen. And for those that, if you're looking at the actor going, where do I know this guy from? Where do I know this guy from? He was in Vikings. He was King Harold in Vikings, which he was great in that show too. And here's one of my worries. Let me share screen here with some of the casting. Is we're looking at this giant cast list. I don't see Elida on there at all.
Ooh.
And what I'm thinking is they are combining Leandrin and Elida in the story.
That could be problematic.
Could be very, I mean, if you're going to combine a bunch of stuff, that might be a logical one, but at the same time, it changes everything.
I know.
From a story standpoint.
And
following the books.
And we can't go into it too much without giving spoilers, and we might as well just wait
by
and
the
see
way,
what they do with
spoiler alert, everything we talk about, because we're talking about the episode as they
I'm gonna try not to as much as I can, and when I know I'm about to give something that's spoilerific because I can't explain things any otherwise, I'll let you know, and we'll give you a countdown if you want to skip ahead. But otherwise, I'm going to try and be as general as possible.
At least is what you're thinking about the difference between Leandrin and Elida when it comes to the underlying color of their.
Yep.
That's okay.
But yeah, I mean, we're definitely going to be giving spoilers with the episodes because we're going to be talking about the episodes. I'm going to try as much as possible to when I reference the books, I'm going to reference as generally as possible. And if I can't think of a way to do that, I'll give a spoiler warning.
Well, the problem I'm having here is we're talking about a character who should be there in the storyline at this point in Elida, because it should have been, I mean, realistically, the characters that ended up in Tarvalon should not have gotten there. I mean, Rand never even goes there until
very end of the series.
Yeah, I mean, what, book 12? Somewhere around there,
or later, yeah,
because they're going there and they end up somewhere else, which ends up ending up somewhere else. And
which, all right, at the very opening of the episode, I was annoyed by that and went, "What the effing f?" But at least they did something useful with it, with Rand saying, "I think I know this place," with Dragon Mount. And I can understand why you would do that if you want to combine scenes and introduce characters earlier, because you don't actually meet the Emerald Seat until book 2. A lot of these Aes Sedai characters, in fact, most of these Aes Sedai characters, you don't meet until book 2 or later. If you're going to go ahead and cast these people and set these scenes and set up these characters earlier, I can understand then why you would want to skip ahead and make all of these things that happen elsewhere in the book happen in Tarvalon. The problem became, as the episode progressed, is things that I was expecting to happen and characters I was expecting to meet never happened.
You know who's also missing from this? Can you see everybody, or is this in the way?
I can see everybody, but I'm just wondering what you're thinking here.
Blaine.
Yes. That jumps out at me now that you mention it, because I was about to say that.
Because you were right. There's a Min.
Yes, there's
a Min, which we're trying to figure out when she's going to pop in. But
yep, I kept expecting her to pop up earlier. So, I was assuming then that people you meet earlier in the book, you're going to meet here in Tarvalon. But if that doesn't happen in episode 6, they've really screwed the pooch, because I don't see.
Well, from what I understand, this is the casting of the whole first season. On this list.
Yeah.
These
are all the major characters these are all the named characters from the first season.
Mm-hmm.
So So there's a bunch of people you were supposed to meet, and I don't understand. I can so let me back up a second. I can understand if you're going to push the introduction of those people until later, when they become more integral to the story, but not if you're going to have all this other extraneous crap that isn't needed and doesn't really work.
Yeah, I
So
guess is there anything else we want to say we liked from the first five?
yeah. So
But and then we can go into the bitching and moaning a little bit.
again, the Tinkers work well.
Tinkers were great, even in episode 5.
The, the
Tinkers.
the Tinkers worked well. I loved their illustration of the way of the leaf, not just what the philosophy is, but then how they try to live it in the face of whatever may come, because it is the way of the leaf and the Tinkers are a thread that will flow through the entirety of the series.
Mm-hmm.
And so I liked how that they set it up, and that they set it up well.
What I didn't like when it comes to the Tinkers is the last interaction with the White Cloaks, because I liked the initial White Cloak introduction, and I know they had to go a little bit over the top to pretty much make Valda somebody you hated. Yes. Which in the books you only know you hate him in the beginning because you see inside his mind.
Yeah.
But they're making the White Cloaks out to be this basically brigand type organization.
The SS.
Yeah. And that's exactly counter to what they were. These were a bunch of good intending people that were misled in a lot of ways. And in fact, part of the story later on, when we get to Galad and his interaction with them, was the fact that they wanted to be good.
How can you redeem this organization that was based on noble ideals, but has become corrupt because it is so myopically focused on its goal that it is willing to ignore its own humanity?
Well, this is like it's like a manifestation of the ultimate Sam Harris argument that even the things with the best intentions can be overrun with dogma.
Yeah. And the reason we don't have that is because we've lost Bornhold. We had him at the beginning there, but even when we had him at the beginning,
where was he in that second scene? Because they don't ever tell you why he's not there in the second scene.
And from the very beginning in the books, the commander of the White Cloaks and the head questioner are kind of at odds, and that gives you a better idea of who and what the children are, because you have this contrast between the noble well-intentioned warriors and the questioners, the Inquisition. Okay, there's no counter to Eamon Valda. So as far as you know, he's
the leader of the White Cloaks. Yeah, yes. White Cloaks. So yeah, that's where I think they started going south with them, especially when they started beating up Tinkers. Even though they made the comment they White Cloaks won't kill Tinkers, it was still, they also wouldn't just beat the shit out of them either. Valda may have found a way to question some of them in the books, to get some in as quote unquote dark friends, for those that saw the thumbnail on the last Wheel of Time episode, which was White Cloaks. Is this a dark friend? That was kind of how he would have done it. It was more of a manipulative state.
That is one of the things that I think was lost, a lost potential of this episode, is the White Cloaks aren't obsessed with hating Aes Sedai. They're obsessed with hating Aes Sedai because they think they're creatures of the dark. They hate the dark. They hate the dark and the Dark One. And I think that has gotten lost because they want to make Eamon Valda this evil caricature who's out on a literal witch hunt to kill Aes Sedai. But that's part of what they do. And like we talked about last time, it's also it's a weakening of the Aes Sedai. There was also a chance here to show how powerful they are, because you are literally in the shadow of the White Tower, and you're going to do this to someone who, he doesn't really spell this out, but presumably Eamon Valda thinks that this is a novice or a wannabe novice trying to get to the tower. And so he's going to stop her, and he's going to find out
in the books, the tower guard would have been all over any group of white cloaks being around the tower.
And it wouldn't have taken much to have a very short scene where you have some tower guards questioning the white cloaks, or coming up to their camp and trying to find out what they're doing here, and have a bit of tension here of the white cloaks trying to keep Perrin and Egwene quiet so they don't give away that they've got these people captive, because the White Tower is a city state. It controls the area around it. It has its own army. And so in the way that they're trying to establish the children, they've weakened the White Tower, who they have been trying to establish as this great power. And so it's really kind of a cluster F there.
Yeah. Okay. So on to the good again. Their pan out depiction of the CG version of Tarvalon was awesome.
Yes. Except for some of the costuming, I thought the design, the art design of the series has been very good, in the same way that the Lord of the Rings movie does such a great job of, that's Middle Earth. That's what I think of. That's what I thought of, and what I think of when I read the books. They did such a great job of translating these words into visual images.
Yeah, so that was pretty good. Yeah, the Warder story. So okay, so but let's go into the good first, because remember we talked about what they were going to do with Steppen.
Yeah.
After how we thought he should have reacted, but he didn't. So how could they best go about it? And then when I was watching episode 5, I was like, okay, they're doing it.
Yeah.
All those good things we talked about, with his struggle, with trying to not to get through life with this thing that he's missing now. Yeah. And
the procession through the streets of Tarvalon, where the crowd reacts to the empty saddle, because losing an Aes Sedai is a big effing deal, because there aren't that many of them.
Yeah, several hundred in the books. Because of this, one of the later plot lines is they were just losing numbers because of this reduction in the power being even present in the world. They went into all kinds of theories on that inside the books, whether it's selective breeding or not fanning out their searches enough or whatever. But yeah, it was a big deal. And then for him as a specific person, I thought the actor did a really good job of showing you that burden he was feeling, this loss that he was feeling. And then the drugging Lan and going and again, spoiler alert, committing suicide on top of it was exactly what you would expect.
Well, I actually had a problem with that. So I guess in the same way that you had a problem with the loyal scene, I had a problem with that. I liked everything up to that, because what we get from the books is that you become so morose, you waste away. It's not like losing a loved one. Okay, because it's something different. The bond is something that's literally physical, not just emotional.
In the books, especially with the Alana scenes, they allude to kind of a suicide watch.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah.
I either missed that or I forgot about it, because what I remember about the Warders from the books is that either you go berserk and you charge into the thick of battle in basically suicide by cop, trying to go out in a blaze of glory, or you waste away.
Well, they talk about both of those.
you have to be force fed because you're so empty you
Mhm.
won't even eat.
They talk about both of those, but they also allude to a kind of a suicide watch. And one of the reasons to rebond somebody was
then I recant that because I'd forgotten that or missed that because it's been too long since I read the books.
But they also said they also did it through some of the sisters' thoughts that they have those thoughts when they lose a warder, although it's not as strong.
Yeah.
So it is something he alluded to. It's just I thought that was the best thing they could have done with it without him. I thought the best thing was him going berserk and saving the day because he was in that state in the initial combat. But then the second part, it really I take back my original thing because the actor did such a good job of portraying that.
And they do a good job of
the plot twist with him using Nynaeve to drug Lan was pretty cool.
And you had some good scenes there that give you good general characterization of the Aes Sedai warder bond, which is important, and then of Lan in particular with Steppen and Lan talking. So you get some of Lan's character there as well from somebody who has known him for a long time without just explicitly exposition jump, just telling exposition.
It was a good way to voice what you see in people's heads in the books. So that was good. And then they went and ruined it.
All right, let's take an old man potty break so I can get some more alcoholic beverages.
Well, I also have a question off air that I want to ask you because it would be an incredible spoiler.
Okay. So we'll see if we want to talk about it online. Yeah. All right. So we had a little conversation off air of what to say and what not to say. So let's get to what we were leading into of where we both thought this episode completely ruined itself. There's plenty of stuff throughout it that we can kind of niggle at, but we can also say, okay, I wouldn't have done it this way, but I can see what you were doing. But the very end of this episode just completely ruins the episode for us because it completely ruins Lan.
Not just completely ruins Lan, but it completely ruins a whole element of Nynaeve. Well, and the boys. So with respect to Lan.
Yeah.
So the scene, for those that have watched it, where he's wailing at the end and they're showing this emotional side of the warders, he's expressing himself emotionally over this whole thing. What the hell was that all about? Because we can think of some speculation on why someone would do that and bring in toxic masculinity and all these things, but Lan was he had the thickest skin of anybody in the books.
He was a stone wall.
They described him as a stone wall.
Yeah.
Even when he was supposed to be in that state Steppen was in, people would say, you need to let down this stone wall so we can even know what you're thinking. And that was one of the foundations of his character development. And to bring this whole crying and wailing and emotional side out in episode 5 of season 1 just basically throws that all away.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point that it also kind of messes with Nynaeve's character, because one of the pivotal parts about her as a character is she's integral in cracking that stone wall. And now you have none of that buildup, and this emotional breakdown is from the death of this friend and warrior comrade of his, and it's only kind of tangentially related to Nynaeve. So you've weakened this other character that you've been trying to set up by having this bizarre emotional outburst.
Well, and it strengthens her character to know that she's the one that broke through this.
Yes.
And so you're talking about strengthening characters instead of this whole Captain Marvel versus, Alien female characters. One was developed and had all these onion layers of depth, and one is just, okay, she's badass.
Yeah.
And so now you've taken away something that makes her badass in this world, because she was able to crack through this stone man and find the actual human being underneath it, versus everybody else in the world, including Moraine.
You've made me think of several different things here, because I'll get to what I was going to say in a second, but a good like backup to what you just said is, it drives me crazy when, and a good example of this is Iron Man 2 versus Black Widow, which you don't have to watch the movies, but if you just watch the fight scenes in the Black Widow movie, Scarlett Johansson, they have her fight like a man. It's stupid and annoying and it's boring. And Iron Man 2, in that scene where she's going into that facility with what's his bucket, the chauffeur, who's busy just trying to fight one guy, and she's going through all these guys, but she doesn't fight like a man because she's smaller than all of the guys she's fighting. They have to be creative with the choreography, and it's a very interesting and fun fight scene. The way she disarms and puts down all of these guys that she just mows through, contrasted to what she does in Black Widow, which is just, I saw this in Captain America, but better. Right? So you've, by trying to make this character like a man instead of make this a strong woman, you've actually weakened and ruined her. You have a thought on that before I try and remember what I was going to say?
Well, I wanted to also go on to the fact that the emotional bond he formed with Rand was important, and the fact that it also cracked this facade to some degree was very relevant to the development of the characters. And now any bond he has with Rand is going to be secondary to this emotional wailing you've already just the fact that he would act like a little bit of an uncle to this kid was significant in the books.
This is someone who has been, and I wish they would have given us an indication at this point of how old Lan is and how old Moraine is, because it does matter. Because that's part of why Lan is a stone wall, because he's older than he seems. Because the Aes Sedai live very long because of their connection to the One Power,
and the Warders live longer because their
Warders get a little bit of that because of that connection. And so he has lived this life for a very long time. So this stoic, almost fatalistic warrior has been ingrained in him for decades. And I wish we would have been given, I'm not going to go into why. I'm not going to go into Lan's backstory too much, because I assume we're going to get there eventually. But they should have been giving us more hints at this already. And now I feel like when they give it to us in subsequent episodes, it's not going to have the impact, because we've already seen the shell come down, the shell that he's supposed to have. And so when you introduce the three boys who he kind of feels a bit of an obligation to try and help. Initially, it's an obligation because these are people Moraine is trying to protect. And so by extension, he's trying to do what he can, which for him is training them in how to fight better, and also kind of making them a little wiser to the wider world.
Yeah, they did this emotional wailing when realistically Lan was like the Bushido warrior poet. His emotion came out in his verbiage, in his in where he chose to allocate his attention.
That's a great analogy, because we see later that there's some references to Borderlander poetry,
Mm-hmm.
and Jordan uses Japanese poetry and Japanese haiku
Mm-hmm.
to represent that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so what I was going to say earlier is so there could be some stupid woke reasons for why he did this, because we can't have him be toxically masculine. But I
Which is
can
the
see
only thing I can think of with the way the rest of it is going.
the Occam's razor to me is what I said earlier when I referenced Critical Drinkers, why modern movies suck. I don't remember which video it was, but he compared and contrasted Star Trek Into Darkness, which was just a ripoff of Star Trek 2, with actual Star Trek 2. Okay. If you remember,
just like I went into the new It versus the original It.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So remember when Spock dies, do I have to give a spoiler alert for something that's 40 years old? I hope not.
Yes. You have to. Okay. No, this is actually something that came up in the comments, is what else are you going to spoil so we know ahead of time? So yeah, we're going to go ahead and just give spoiler alerts. Yeah.
So there's a really impactful death scene at the end of Star Trek 2 that also happens in Star Trek Into Darkness. But in Star Trek Into Darkness, it's screaming and fast cut action scenes that happen next, because that's how modern movies are made. And I was going to say that's how modern movie audiences are, but I don't know that they are. I think that's just how the people who make them
that's how we're told we are.
Yes, that's how we're told we are. That's a good way to put it. So one of the reasons I despise J.J. Abrams is because he kind of famously has the rule of cool. If it looks cool, well, no, it can't just look cool. There has to be a reason for it, or it's incredibly shallow, and you forget it 2 seconds after you see it. So in the original, which is actually good, Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan, the death scene is very subdued and quiet. And then in after that, there is a funeral for this dead comrade who's been, a lifelong friend, very close friend. And the actor gives a great performance because he's a military man, so he's trying to hold himself up and be proper, and be kind of the example and the leader for his crew. But there's this brief moment where his voice cracks and he almost breaks down, but then he reins it back in. So it is absolutely nothing like the modern version in Into Darkness. There's no wailing, there's no screaming. It's just that little little crack, and then he stops and he grits his teeth and he pulls it back in. That's how you do grief and have it be impactful, especially for a character like this. This is a lifelong military man. This is a leader who has to be an example for the rest of his crew. And that's so you see that this is perfectly analogous with how Lan is supposed to be. And so in that funeral scene, because I'm an idiot, I was expecting him to kind of do something like that when he steps up to do the whatever, to reach down and touch step in. And I was expecting him, because he was kind of shaking, to kind of pull it back in and have that brief moment where he looks like he's going to break down, but he won't break because he's a stone wall. But
he didn't.
He screams and he wails, and it's, oh gosh, what's going on here?
Yeah. This is something in parallel to some Peterson discussions, where he talks about being the strong one in a funeral. Is if you are weak at a funeral, you are nothing to everybody else there. And so to be the strong one in that situation would actually help everyone else, whereas this wailing and crying is just adding to the misery. And I don't know where they're going with it, because he apparently connected with Nynaeve in that moment by her facial expression or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's a lazy
I couldn't
connection.
tell if that was supposed to be a connection with her or with Moraine because they're standing right next to each other. And they're doing this weird thing where Moraine is already worried about
Well,
Lan and about losing the bond, about the impact
well,
on him if she dies.
there's that, but there's also this it's kind of a lazy character development with their romance is what I saw from that scene was she seeing the human underneath the wall, whereas in the books she exposed the human under the wall, and so that's a little harder to do on screen. And I think they if you're going to be a great filmmaker and you're going to be the next Game of Thrones or whatever, you got to do it. You got to take the challenge and actually make that happen versus it being this thing that's
Yeah.
already laid out there.
Did you watch Batman the animated series when you were a lad?
Off and on, not like religiously.
I remember it distinctly, partly because it came out when we were living in Germany, and so someone when it came out, a friend of ours said, "Oh my gosh, this is awesome!" And he filled a VHS with it and mailed it to us and said, "You've got to watch this because it's incredible," and because it hadn't come out there yet, and me and my brother wore out that tape because it was so good, and so I grant you that part of this is nostalgia, but I consider Batman the Animated Series a top TV series across any genre, live action or animated. And there's one scene that I point out to make my case, and it's this. So pretty much everybody knows the story of Batman, even if you don't watch a lot of Batman. And there's this great scene in one of the first episodes where Robin finds out who was responsible for the death of his parents, and he's going after them. And Batman has to try and chase him down to stop him because Robin's going to kill the guy. And so Batman confronts Robin and is telling them that you don't want to do this. This is gonna stay with you and haunt you for the rest of your life if you go down this path. And Robin just screams at him that you know uh I have to. You don't know what it's like to have to carry this burden. You don't know what it's like to lose your parents. And he's telling this to Batman, which, like I said, everybody knows the backstory to
Yeah.
Batman. What made the series so great is encapsulated in this scene because Batman doesn't respond. And there aren't a lot of live action TV series that would rest that scene on a look, let alone an animated series.
Mm-hmm.
Because the next frame is just Batman narrowing his eyes and just looking at him silently, because you don't have to say anything there. In fact, it's much more impactful if you don't say anything. And
It's
if
like
Batman,
it's impactful to not show the shark.
exactly,
Yeah.
and if Batman being Batman, what everyone knows Batman to be, if he gave some emotional speech, that would weaken the character, because that's not who he is. He's a stone wall, like we're talking about Lan here, because of his history. He since a small child, he has been living with this pain, and then into his young adult years, living with trying to do something about it in his own way as best he can. And it has created this stone wall. The great the great part about Batman's character, especially when you have Batman and Superman crossovers, is Superman is the alter ego for Clark Kent, and it's the other way around for Batman. Bruce Wayne is the alter ego. He is Batman because he is so damaged to his core. That's who he is, and that's why that series was so great, and why that scene is so great, is because they played it in a much more subdued and thus much more powerful way. And this is like 1993 or something when this came out. And it just goes to this idea that television and movies now are written by children who think they're writing for children, because you have to have a certain degree of emotional maturity and intellectual confidence to write something like that. If you don't have those two things, then you're going to have Batman give some sort of emotional monologue about how, how hurt he is and how much pain he's had to live through with his life. But it's much more impactful if you don't show the shark.
Yeah. So yeah, that ruined the White Cloaks attacking the Tinkers, and then the land scene ruined that whole episode for me.
I didn't mind the White Cloaks attacking the Tinkers. I did think it was over the top, though, because they shouldn't. Yeah, White Cloaks are a-holes, but they shouldn't have been trying to beat the ever-living crap out of the Tinkers so much as just knock them down and bowl through them. Ride their horses through. And if some people happen to get trampled to death even, oh, well, that's their fault. But their goal is to get to these other people. They don't, the point is they don't care about the Tinkers. They don't care who they ride down and who they hurt to get to their goal. They're not let me rephrase. They're not all sadists. They're just so arrogant and focused on their goal that who they hurt along the way can be justified in their own minds.
What I thought would have been better there, with still the same kind of bend to it, would have been, okay, you're going to do this whole locking arms thing or whatever. We're going to take you and you and you and you into questioning. And Aram sneak them off in the back while they did that. That would have been, I think, a little bit more accurate for Valda and the White Cloaks, because then the White Cloaks would have been like, okay, I'm just taking him, and Valda's going to do his thing because he's the Inquisitor, and that probably would have been a little better.
Yeah. Well, I do think that the one thing that the way that confrontation did do is it established the Tinkers as a known entity throughout the world. It's kind of like what they didn't do with the Aes Sedai that I was ranting about earlier, is you're literally in the Tower of Tarvalon here and you're doing this stuff and it weakens Tarvalon. It's what they could have done, like we said, with having some tower guards show up and say, what are you doing here in our land, etc. and so forth.
Okay, so let's go on the diversity angle, diversity, inclusion, etc. So here's the groups of people where that actually makes sense, and you could have just gone all balls out on the diversity cast: White Cloaks, the Aes Sedai, the Tinkers, and the Shanjan. Those are the four groups where you could have said, we're going to just cast it how we want to, because they are a conglomerate of all the other nations. White Cloaks came from everywhere because they believed this thing.
Yes.
Aes Sedai came from everywhere because they had this power.
Yes.
Tinkers
or even Tarvalon and the Tower Guard, they come from all over, because even if they're men, or even if they don't have the power, they're attracted to this ideal of what the White Tower represents.
Yes. And then Tinkers, because they believe in the way of the leaf, and these people travel to all the different regions picking up new recruits, couldn't be the most diverse cast. And then since we haven't gotten there yet, I'm assuming it's going to be 2-3 season, somewhere around there. The Shanjan coming in is a vast empire that is under one ruler that actually very explicitly talks about the diversity within that empire,
because they're across a landmass that is essentially North America and South America as far as its size and scope.
Not only that, is a core group of them came from the original landmass. So you've got those originals, you've got the people who are already there, you've got different regions of the people who were already there, all coming together under one empire. And this empire makes an emphasis on building family through merit. So that is a diverse group of people. So those 4 things could have been your diversity
You
and
know,
inclusion.
and that's I said I was going to mention this as a reference. I'm not going to go too much into it if anyone hasn't seen it, but I saw a commercial for season 2 of The Witcher today, which I'm really excited about. And I have not played any of the games. And we wanted to talk about this more in depth at some point and see if we get Chuck back on, because he has done Twitch streaming of Witcher 3, I believe it was. And you've played all the games, I think.
No, I played Witcher 3.
You played Witcher 3.
Yeah.
So I went into the first season cold, knowing practically nothing about the lore. I knew a little bit from what some friends had told me, but I didn't know much. And they do an interesting thing with that first season that I won't give away. But it can be confusing. But they're weaving 3 different storylines together, but each storyline is done well enough that even if you go when you're sitting back going, how do these 3 storylines go together? That's your only confusion, because each storyline is done well enough that you're not lost within those storylines. And
especially since there's time discrepancies between the storylines.
Yes, that's what I was
one is taking place 20 years different than another. Right. Yeah.
That's what I wasn't going to go into, but it.
Oh, sorry. Spoiler alert.
Just be aware, if you haven't watched it yet, that you're going to get a little confused as these 3 storylines, but then as they begin to converge, they do a good job of letting you realize that's what's happening. And you go, oh, okay, I see. Even if you don't know the exact details, like, I have nerdy friends that knew exactly what year within the game world this was happening. And I was like, I don't know that, but I didn't need to know. I just know that, okay, this is happening before this is happening before that. They're all converging together. Mm-hmm. They do a good enough job of letting you know that. And this is like Wheel of Time, like Dune, which I mentioned before. This is a very complicated game world, but they do a good job of letting you know how this fantasy world works. And to your point just a second ago, when you see these, like the wizard, the order is very multicultural because they're drawn from all over. Anyone who happens to have this ability is pulled in.
Your membership card is based on your ability that you were born with versus where you came from. And same with the white cloaks. Your membership card is your degree of how much you believe their doctrine.
And in The Witcher, much like you were talking about, you have this invading army that is kind of conquering and absorbing these other places, and so they're more multicultural. So you have that there, and then you have so you do have these elements, and you can do these things, and yet still, I feel like there was another reference to the 2 rivers and how people look in episode 5. I don't remember what it was. Maybe it was when Loyal was talking to Rand about how, the 2 rivers people look like this or whatever. And again, you're left going, what? Huh?
Well, Loyal talks about how he looks like an Aiel.
Yes.
Says, I didn't know I would meet an Aiel here.
I thought there was another reference somewhere to regions and how someone was supposed to know someone looks like that, kind of similar to, what was it, episode 3 or 4, where Tom apparently knows Matt is from the 2 rivers by his accent, and it's like, what accent? He sounds like everybody else. So again, if you're going to do this woke casting and have this diverse cast, you can't have lines like that with the straight face. It doesn't work.
Okay, so let's get on that path with the woke casting. Let me bring up one thing. I'm going to bring up the thing I've already brought up a couple times, which is all the people here.
Yeah.
So our dissenter in one of our videos talked about Sen, right?
Yep.
Because he was as gnarled and dark as an old root.
Yep.
If that was what they're basing this on, why is he a crusty old white dude?
Yep.
I mean, just throwing that out there. So, so if you're saying that the 2 rivers is this because of this one description, why is that one person described the exact opposite of what that is. So your argument is moot. If you want to say who destroyed whose argument, their casting destroyed your own argument.
Yeah, the casting destroyed everything.
The casting destroyed everything. Well, no, I do like some of the actors and actresses. Like I said, Leandrin is on point. Moiraine is good. Okay, so let's go down great to good. Leandrin and Steppen were great. Loyal, I'm going to give you as really good. Moiraine, Lan, I'm cool with Rand.
Most of the time, I am.
Most of the time. Well, but again, you're supposed to get annoyed with Rand.
That's what I'm trying to, in my own mind, discern is how much of when I don't like them, I have to think, okay, is that attributable to the acting or to the writing and directing? Because like in that Loyal scene, I think that's the writing and direction, that he's okay there, but it's just he's being directed and written badly. So I think it was
directly and written badly. Egwene's not bad. I don't like the way she's written, but the actress herself is not bad. Perrin, he's overdoing the brooding.
Yeah.
But again, he's probably being directed to do so.
Because he's being directed to brood, and Perrin isn't brooding. He's just quiet because he's contemplative in the books.
I actually like Aram. I don't know where they're going with his character. But
I didn't like him that much at first, but in episode 5, I thought he was better. He was more like, okay, this is what I think he should be like.
I don't like Matt at all. He's not doing it for me for what Matt's supposed to be.
No,
I'm still pissed about Abel Coffin, but that's the story they wrote. But
Matt is kind of the stereotypical lovable trickster kind of guy, and you actually get some very specific scenes about that in the books.
But they've written him into the series as an afterthought.
That's a good way of looking at it, because
they threw in the dagger because they know it's important, and we're wondering if Fane's going to come back,
which is odd because they're trying really hard to say that he can channel and he's the dragon right now. And yet you're right that in a lot of ways he does seem like an afterthought.
Let's see. Alana, you're right. Not to be shallow or chauvinistic, but the person cast is just not sexy enough.
Well,
that was her shtick. Was I look at her and my first thought is, let me tuck my pants in a little bit here.
Yep. Well, yeah, and like we said, because that's one of the layers of these characters is Alana uses her coquettishness to disarm you. Contrasted
and
with
not only is the actress just not physically gifted enough, but she's also not even portraying that.
But not even portraying that because you could. I was going to say that even if you don't have that just still picture model look in a film, you can at least portray that, because there are people who, if you just looked at a picture of them, you wouldn't think would be super duper player, but they can actually do it because of their personality and the way they present themselves. But you only get that a smidge, just the tiniest little bit in this last episode, where she's in Moraine's room talking to her, and my wife said, "Is she coming on to her?" And I was like, well, in the books, yeah, she could be, but here, I don't know, maybe. But
Nynaeve is okay.
They did do with Leandrin, and again, that's one of the ones we think is being done very well, is Leandrin is very blatantly trying to be alluring to Moiraine to get some information out of her.
Yeah. Nynaeve is okay. I thought Logan was okay. I wish we'd seen more Peyton Fane at this point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's one of these. That's one of the bizarre ones where they're sticking too close to the books. You're like, you're not sticking close to the books with all these other things. Why aren't you showing this guy
Yeah, yeah. Especially since he's going to be so integral with that
later?
dagger.
And so this is annoyingly this is where the business of filming gets in the way of actually filming, is that presumably one of the reasons they're putting a lot of these secondary characters so much more into the first part of the story is because they didn't want to cast them, have them on screen for 3 minutes, and then have them go away until halfway through the second season and still keep them under contract.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is my presumption of at least part of the reason why they're having so many of these characters that you don't really see until later.
Except that they already recast Matt.
Except that they already recast Matt.
Yeah. Which hopefully is better. So
which hopefully is better, but a lot of that.
But again, what is the writing too? Because he's just not a very interesting character in the series when he's should be top 3 in the books.
And a lot of that is because he's where Perrin is brooding, Matt is mopey.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not who Matt is. Matt is the one who doesn't want to go home. And because they made this bizarre choice to give him a man whore father and alcoholic mother, he's compelled to go back home to take care of his sisters. Well, how the hell are you going to portray that later on in the series?
Mm-hmm.
He has to go home. But by the way you've set him up, he's the worst character and the most dislikable character in the series if he doesn't go home. So what are you gonna do?
Maybe they switched the Perrin and Matt story.
Oh geez. Oh my god. That actually would make sense with what they're setting up. Because why would Perrin want to go home? He killed his wife. Mm-hmm. Why would he ever want to go back there and have to, relive that and be reminded of it? He has no connection to the two rivers anymore. That is, oh dear Lord, you're right.
I'm sorry I said it out loud because now I'm like,
oh gosh, the more I think I hate you, because the more I think about it, the more I can see that because of the Manetheren storylines
and
the way that ties in.
Mm-hmm. And there, I'm not gonna say what I was about to say because it would give away too much.
Yeah, that's a lot of book spoilers, but that is the more I think about that, the more
speculate.
I'm going to speculate right now. I'm going to go on record as I 70% think you're right.
Okay, I hate that's probably true. Okay, so let's speculate from season 5 for episode 5 what it's going to end like, knowing the books.
Yeah,
because the first one is called Eye of the World, and the Eye of the World is where the first books end. Which, if you don't know what that means, good, because we're not going to spoil it. Okay,
because that's a big effing deal.
But we've already passed it in some other things that have happened, where they ended up and who they're involved with. So, so how do they manifest the end of this? Because I'm kind of trying to figure out where they're going.
Yeah, me too. We had some commenters say that, and that's kind of where me and the wife are, and some other people that I've like our friend T, is that he was more, it's not so much that he liked it so much as, like I said, he didn't hate it, and he was interested enough to wonder where they were going. And that's kind of where I'm at too, is wondering where they're going. And I'm just looking at the episode list. Okay. So sometimes on Prime, they show you the episodes, even if they're not out yet. and they're not showing them here, so I don't have episode titles.
Well, we know we're
which
going to
would
see
be
Min just from casting.
just from casting, and I
Yeah.
was expecting to see that now. And they did make a mention in the last episode of the Amarillan Sea.
Yeah,
They
she's on
pronounce
the
it weird.
casting. Swan
And
Sanche.
and she is coming from Camelin, I think they said at towards the end of episode 5 that she was almost there, or she had arrived or was about to arrive with her procession from Camelin, which is why I'm confused that Elaine is not on that list of announced cast, because I assumed
Swan's on there,
that's where
Leone's
we were
on
going to
there.
meet her. So I assume that, I don't know how they're going to do this, but I assume Min is going to be with them, and that's where we're going to meet her.
Why do you think that though?
Because it's the only logical way, since they didn't introduce her earlier, and since
I think she's going to be her character, but on the streets of Tarvalon, not in Berlin.
See, I was assuming that they were going to, since it kind of looks like they're cutting all this stuff and dragging it to Tarvalon, I was assuming they were, I don't want to get too much into book spoilers here, but I was assuming they were going to fast forward her character a bit. And so I was assuming that her and a bunch of other characters were going to be fast forwarded and kind of combine the earlier parts of their introductions in the books with stuff that happens later and smash it all together in Tarvalon, so that we can meet them before the main group leaves.
Which what's the end game of season 1? Meet everybody? Or is it going to be a big conflict with the White Cloaks, which is what they seem to be setting up? Or
no, I think they're just trying to set all these things up so that they can keep them rolling through season 2. And I think
I think you're right, because I don't think they're confident in the fact that they're going to have multiple seasons.
Yeah,
they announced the season 2 halfway when this one was about to be released.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's like, I think I mentioned Dune. The guy was the same guy who did Blade Runner 2049, which flopped so hard that they wouldn't green light Dune Part 2 until they got the returns from Dune 1. So that was fun. And I was wondering how much they'd green lit ahead of time with this. But I think the main thing they're trying to do with all of this stuff that's happening in season 1 that makes us go, what the heck is this? Is I think they're trying to set up these Aes Sedai characters and storylines so that when they're introduced in season 2, you already know who they are and they already have more weight, is what my guess is. And that my guess is that season 1 is about to start progressing much more like book 1 here in the next episode. My guess is, I'm trying to think about how to phrase this without spoiling it. My guess is episode 6 is going to end with them entering the thingy to begin their travel to where they go at the end of book 1. You know what I'm saying? So I think that I think season 1's going to end where book 1 does, but I think they're going to skip a whole lot of stuff there in an effort to set up stuff that happens later.
So do you think they actually name the dragon this season, or if they still keep it ambiguous that it's could be 5?
Well, that's a good point.
Because they made, what was the line in this last one where someone said one of the 5 is here? And it was Nynaeve is in the tower. I think Moraine said one of the 5 is here. So she already knew it was Nynaeve, not Logain or somebody else somewhere else. So.
I don't remember. And now you're annoying, because now I'm
wanting to say that was her conversation with Alana.
I'm trying to think of how they could do that. I don't see how they could do it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they came up with some ridiculous way of doing it.
Yeah. So for people that are having trouble keeping up with this, is we're trying to speculate based on how the books went, but also how everything's different now. So you almost can write a new series as far as predictions, because it's its own thing now. It's not even close enough to the names are the same. That's about it. So
yeah.
Well, we probably should cut it off there. We've been at it for hour and a half at least.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Episode.
So IMDb has episode titles, and it looks like there are only going to be 8 episodes in the first season. And if you've read the books, the episode titles are going to give away a lot.
Oh crap! Wait, there, look.
Well, I'll tell you, I was right. Apparently, I was right that they're going to cut a whole lot of stuff that happens in the later part of the book. Because the next episode, according to IMDb, is titled The Flame of Tarvalon, which looks like it's going to Sawan Sanche is going to kind of be the central figure there. And then The Dark Along the Ways, which was the thing I was talking about, which I don't want to give away, but that's going to be episode 7. And then episode 8 is The Eye of the World, which was the title of the first book. And oh geez, I don't man, that is cutting so much stuff. I just don't know. And
top
again,
review 1 star. Sorry. Top review a bit painful.
Where was that?
It's on IMDb. I just clicked on Wheel of Time on IMDb to try to get to your list.
I was looking at the episode list and
user reviews. Yeah,
a bit painful is a polite way to put it.
The show gives me more old attempts at D&D movie vibes than Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, which it should be for the budget.
This is where me and wife get in an argument because she thought I was being overly harsh, because I compared it to, did you ever read the books or watch the television series of The Sword of Shannara?
Yes. So this actually brings up an interesting little side note. Is I wanted a review I could trust from somebody who hadn't read the books, and so I asked my mom to watch it because she actually liked the Sword of Shannara series, and she's you know, she's into kind of fantasy stuff, and but she also likes to read them too. And so she is going to watch the series and then read the books following it, so the reverse order. And so I'm interested to see what review she gives.
Well, this is something that I was talking about with T, because he didn't like Shannara because it was so tween and dumb.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I was arguing with the wife about, is because after the first episode, I said this was worse than Shannara.
It gave me that same vibe. It was very tween.
Exactly. Yeah. But here's why I say it's worse, is because as bad as Shannara was, it knew what it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was a tween teen dumb MTV series, and then I think it went on to some other network, kind of cheap fantasy series. So it knew what it was, and it didn't pretend to be something else. Mm-hmm. So as much as I thought it was bad, it was at least bad within its own parameters.
Well, for those of our haters out there, the Sword of Shannara series, live action, quote unquote, I actually enjoyed to some degree, even though I had read the original source material, and I loved them from childhood on. But again, I accepted that fact going into it. I could see right away this was an MTV special, you know. And then the fact that you had Manu Bennett saving the whole series as the druid, it was it was actually enjoyable to watch because of the good acting that went along with it. And there were actually some good young stars that were in it, but you had to throw that away, that it was, this is going to be this thing that is supposed to attract a younger audience. And they made no bones about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As so, a dumb action movie. Okay, you can watch it and be entertained because it doesn't pretend to be anything other than a dumb action movie. Wheel of Time is pretending to be, and by their own words, wanting to be Game of Thrones, but they're not taking the time to create the depth of character and world that allowed Game of Thrones to be successful in those first couple of seasons.
Well, it's not only the Game of Thrones reference, it's the fact that they claim to be in line with the spirit of the books, including quote unquote Jordan's notes, and conferring with Sanderson and
Harriet Sanderson Jordan. Is listed as a consulting producer. Harriet is listed. Robert Jordan, James Rigney is his real name. Robert Jordan was his pen name. Harriet is his wife and is listed was also his editor and is listed as a consulting producer. So, okay, but I mean, you can consult all you want with people who know stuff, but in the end, you're going to do what you do. And you've kind of put these people in a bind, like you were referencing comments that Brandon Sanderson had made, and they were very political because you kind of back these guys into a corner, and what are they going to say? It's like, do you remember, it was like 10 years ago, this bizarre live action thing came on, like, I don't know if it was the UPN network, if that was still a thing or not. It was some odd network, like at 3 a.m. And it was the prologue to The Eye of the World. Like practically word for word.
Oh, yeah.
And the people who did it got all indignant because Harriet had issued a statement of, I had nothing to do with this and I don't know what this is. And the people who'd made this had claimed, oh, that was defamatory and they were going to sue her. But she was being honest of, I had nothing to do with this and I don't know what this is. And what it apparently was a group had bought the rights to the Wheel of Time and they were about to expire. And the way these contracts usually work is you have X amount of years to produce something using this license or it expires. And so they had thrown something together that looked cheap. It had bad effects. The acting wasn't great, but the writing was actually really good. It was a very faithful adaptation of the prologue of the first book. And they had just thrown it out there on some, syndicated network at like 3 a.m. And the internet started going, what the heck is this? But that, so the point being, the people who know what's going on and know the world, consulting with them or not consulting with them doesn't really matter.
Well, and it's easy to say, well, he would have wanted this when he's dead.
Yeah, that's cheap and cheesy and kind of gruesome, really. Of how the hell would you know? Man's dead. Let him rest in peace.
I mean, we have things where he said, oh, I think this guy would have been played well by this actor. I think he said Nicolas Cage for Rand at one point or something like that. It's like, okay, so you can have some of his thoughts. He has expressed these things.
He was very open and corresponded with his fans a lot, both in writing and at book signings and conventions and stuff. So, there's a lot of Robert Jordan said this or that out there, but it's because he wasn't one of these annoying NFL coaches, going back to how we opened the show. He wasn't one of these annoying NFL coaches that give you, like boilerplate nonsense, worthless answers of, we're just, we're going to trust the process. We're going to work in all three phases. we're going to play as a team. It's like, you didn't tell me anything. You know, he would talk like a normal guy from all accounts that I've read. I never got to you know, meet him or go to listen to him, and I don't think I ever found video or audio of him, but I read a lot of his of accounts of people, you know, interacting and asking questions with him, and he was by all accounts a very normal person when it came to talking with him, is that he would answer questions.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't one of these giving you boilerplate political nonsense, nothing answers.
Well, and throughout this whole process of 20 some odd years of writing these books and everybody speculating on what's going to happen or whatever, he was very open and honest when it came to, well, this is a ridiculous fan theory. Or
to the point of sometimes being infuriating.
Maybe this one has merit. Or one of the was it a play on words when Death killed Asmodean?
He said,
when
"Oh
Death
God!"
took him, and he said, "No, that was that was literal. He died.
Yes.
It wasn't a play on who killed him or anything like that." Yeah.
He said something. I feel like he said something to the effect of like,
he's dead. He's not coming back.
Yeah, and he said something to the effect of you know, "Oh God, if I had meant that, make me stop writing," or something. Because it was such a terrible idea.
Which sucks, because I was one of those that wanted Asmodean to come back because I liked him, but I liked the evil dude. But
yeah, you know, that is an annoyingly good point, because you're going to they've started to allude to some of the big bads already. And theoretically, if they go by the bush, you're going to start meeting some of them very soon. And Jordan did a very good job of
personifying the evil in a way that you would understand
Jamie
why
Lannister.
They went down there.
I couldn't remember his name. Yeah. I got so mad kind of right at the end of when Game of Thrones was good. You start to sympathize with Jamie Lannister, and it's really annoying because he's such a bad guy at the beginning of the series. Mm-hmm. And then you start to see why he's such a bad guy, and you actually start to sympathize with him, and it's really freaking annoying. But it's good. It's good quality writing to make you sympathize with this guy that you have loathed for like 3 seasons, and now all of a sudden you're going, oh.
And there's a little bit of play in there where you have to actually understand sociology and human psychology to understand why good people do bad things sometimes.
Yeah.
And why bad people can end up being the good guys sometimes, if you really think about it.
And there's stuff like that happens through the book series, and I just don't have the faith that they're going to be able to do that in this series with how shallow everything is. I have zero faith,
because there's so much depth that it needs to go into it, and they have done zero effort in establishing depth in any character.
To that point, looking at the titles for the next 3 episodes, and I have to think, we were talking about Lan and his backstory and why he is the way he is, and there's a lot of that stuff that you learn at the end of the first book that it really looks like they're going to skip. So once more, in order to set up all this other stuff that doesn't actually happen in the first book, they're skipping over a ton of characterization. Now, granted, maybe they're intending to put it later, but from a practical point of view, how are you going to have a later if you don't invest the audience in these characters?
Where do you get the list?
So if you go to MDib and you go to the Wheel of Time page,
I think I might have found it.
Yeah,
there are 3 seasons.
Oh, really? I didn't see that.
Let's see. Okay, that didn't help. All right, I'll look at it later, but
yeah.
all right, we got to call it. I got to start getting ready for dinner and get ready for work tomorrow.
Well, I'm curious to read what anyone else thinks in the comments section, and see what people thought of episode 5, as well as where they think it's going.
Yeah, especially those that haven't read it.
Yeah.
Where do you think the storyline is going? Because to me, if I detach myself from the books and I see what I've seen on the screen, it's almost like there's no plot at all.
Yeah. That's a good point.
I would love to hear the opinion of people that haven't read the books yet on if they can see something, and because we know we have a very biased view on this.
Well, besides the one thing that they've kind of hammered at in every episode, which is the dragon reborn, is there anything else that you feel like they've actually foreshadowed? Like I brought up the heron mark on the sword earlier that they zoomed in on. Is there anything else that you feel like they've actually foreshadowed and are setting up, or is it just shallow? Is it just kind of a shallow mess?
To me, the only thing that makes sense at this point is identifying which one of the 5 it is. Or if my theory on if it's all 5, how that actually plays into it. So that identity at the end, that's the only logical conclusion I can see from what's on screen so far. But yeah, I would love to see or hear what people think. And we'll review episode 6 as soon as we can watch it.
Won't that be fun?
Yeah.
And then the last episode, it looks like, comes out the 24th is a Friday, so Christmas Eve. So I don't know when we'll get to that. We'll see where we're both at and what kind of setup we have to get to that last episode.
I'll be here for Christmas, so I'll be able to set up however you want. So these things we don't need a whole lot of reference material, so we could do it. You could do it on your phone too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, let us know, like, subscribe, share it with your friends. If you've got some Wheel of Time nerds, get them in here, because we want to have this debate. So
yeah, and I'm especially for contrary opinions, and by contrary I mean people who didn't think it was good, because after the first or second episode, the wife pulled up on her phone a Facebook group that is like the first Wheel of Time Facebook group that formed, and it's not official, but it's like the oldest and biggest one. And it was like a live reaction, and all 3 of the people on it were singing its praises. And I was like, what are you, did you people watch the same thing I watched?
Well, and so this dusty wheel that that was referenced to before on one of our commenters, some of these things coming out of this, you talk about Sanderson's political reaction, is they're selling it.
Yeah.
Because this is part of the franchise that is Wheel of Time now, and we have to accept that fact. Revenue formed here is revenue for everybody Wheel of Time connected.
That's a good point. And it's all clicks and content, even if it's all clicks and content for all the people who essentially make a living now off of the Wheel of Time fandom. So yeah.
And there's two schools of thought. Is it more faithful to the franchise to be critical of anything that we consider detrimental, or is it more faithful to the franchise to continue it on? And there are going to be 2 camps on that. So
yeah. Well, we'll see. I think the big indicator for that, I really think, is going to be this final episode of this first season, because that's going to be so pivotal to the story, to the world, and to what it sets up later, that I think a lot of the questions that we have about this series and about its production and direction are going to be answered with that last episode.
Yeah. So one thing that is concerning to me, just looking at the cast, is we see Min. we don't see Elaine, and we don't see Avienda, which she would come along later anyways.
Right.
I'm wondering if they're consolidating 3 characters into one there too.
Oh, that would be so stupid.
That would be so stupid because it's pivotal.
I hate you for saying these things because I could see that happening.
Especially if you want to make a progressive show. What's more progressive than polyamory?
All right, go away. Go away. Stop saying things. You're making me angry.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Later, y'all.